So we have Tommy Lee.
Yep.
Josh Jansen.
Here.
Carrie Snow. Here. Jenna Reed. Here. Glenn Tucker.
Yeah.
And Molly O'Donnell.
Here.
Lauren Selly. Here. Andrew Daniels. Here. And Sarah Hardy. Here.
All right, next up on the agenda, approval of minutes from our April 9th, 2024 meeting. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Second? Good. So any discussion on this? All right, hearing none, let's vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? All right, motion passes. Number 3, public invited to be heard. I do not see anyone. Number 4, organizational updates, advisory board interview schedule.
All right, so the period for applications closed April 26th. And we have, there's a summary in your packet of the terms that we are going to be interviewing and selecting people for. But I think Tom needs to.
Just to let you all know, I did not reapply, so June will be my last meeting. I thoroughly enjoyed being on the advisory committee and the commission at the time. And I think it's in great hands now, and it'll do good things in the future.
I am personally sad and disappointed, but also
Disappointed.
that's fine. No, I mean, no, that's like,
Not in you.
I'm disappointed for this team, for us to be missing you, etc. You know what I mean.
I know what you're saying. Thank you.
So that means we'll be filling, that's why what we've got on here is 3 regular member terms ending June 30th, 2027, 1 unexpired regular member term ending June 30th, 2025. So that was the one that Lauren vacated. So 4 spots, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 candidates, which is amazing. Most other city boards and commissions are not that lucky to have that many applicants interested. So that's really great, at least in the history. I'm not sure about this round. Last time it was a struggle. That does include Glenn and Carrie in that 11. And just to note that the Board of Commission has decided not to interview existing members that are reapplying, just interviewing the new members, potential new members. So the City Council, which is the Board of Commissioners for LHA, they'll be doing interviews in June on a Saturday. But that means this group needs to select 2 people to conduct the interviews, and that needs to happen by June 5th in order to be ready in time for the Board of Commissioner interviews, which I think are June 15th or something. And so then the LHA board would then appoint those members. Should be after that point. They do it in a board meeting. I'm trying to recall what we did last time. But it should be then at the July board meeting, I would assume. Potentially June, actually, because I think June is
It's the June.
the June meeting.
It's the June
on the
meeting,
18th.
so that really consider for July.
Okay, gotcha. Great. Okay. I would also note that last time when we were selecting who would have which term, it was random. And that did mean that in this case, Tom was selected just for 1 year, which is, it's awkward, but it's, it is part of the process. You can do, this group can either choose a random selection again or strategically direct that more based on the applicants. So that's a choice of yours. So first we would need 2 volunteers. I know Arlene has done it in the past, so we could.
She also told me she wanted to do it.
She wanted to do it again?
Yeah.
Okay. So then we need 1 volunteer that can't be Glenn or Carrie to assist. And then we need to talk scheduling as well.
I'll do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the Saturday is the one where the Board of Commissioners would do it. You don't have to be there for that.
Oh, good.
Typically what we've done in the past is we've set it for a weekday because you'll have a couple staff members assist and sit in as well. So it's kind of an open book on a weekday. Maybe we could start an email conversation with Arlene to set a day. Okay. Wonderful, thank you. Is there anything else I think we got covered?
Well, then one more thing in June, we're going to have to then go to the chair as well.
That's correct.
So that will be that might have to be the July advisory board meeting, because I think the June advisory board meeting would be before the interviews. Because it's the second Tuesday.
Then what, just Arlene, then just first side over, then the July, and then for the new, okay.
Yes, because the advisory board meeting is June 11th. Board applicant interviews with the board are the 15th. So it would have to be, just come in on that July meeting and have Arlene act as the vice.
Make sure a lot of the public are invited to be heard.
Please.
Yeah.
I bet you will.
Okay. Just a couple things of note. I do recognize a couple of names on here. There is an asterisk on here. There is one member that is currently on the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board, just to note that, but that's okay because it's not serving City Council, so it's okay to double up. So I think I'm excited about this. It looks like we have a good number of people, and I haven't seen any applications yet, but I do recognize a couple of names just from industry work, so that's exciting. Okay, any questions about that?
So going back to the term that expires in 2025, you said we could either identify somebody ahead of time or just randomly assign. So one of the
After interviews, but yes.
after the interviews, okay.
So that'd be your choice, whether you make it random or select.
From my understanding, from city clerks is like Glenn and Carrie, if they get selected once again, whatever term they were already assigned to, that's the same term that they would serve the following. So then that means they wouldn't be serving like Lawrence, if that makes sense.
So they wouldn't fill Lawrence, which is the 2025, right?
Right.
So it would just be a new 3-year situation. Oh, okay.
So it'll be one of the new folks that gets
It would, yes.
25
That is
expiration, they'll go on your term basically. Yeah.
That makes it more clear. We were in the reason we had to do that last time must have been different then.
The
I
reason
think
why
we
we
didn't
had
have
to do
enough.
that last time is because it went from 5 to
Staggered.
7.
Yeah.
To 7, so added board members, so they had to
Okay.
do staggered.
That is better. Okay.
Oh, also, any questions on the interviews? Questions?
Oh, right. So these are the same interview questions we used last time. And so if you have any feedback for modifications, if there's anything missing, we do have the opportunity to do that ahead of the interviews.
Any questions or changes? So let's go on to the next one, development project updates.
For development, we've got village under construction. I think we talked about this last time. We're getting to we're in heavy construction now. You walk in, there's scaffolding and plastic everywhere in the lobby. There's a tunnel to maintain access to the front door, but it is loud. It is impactful right now. So of all the times in the whole construction period, the next month or so is going to be the most intense. And so we're trying to make sure we get responses to resident questions as quick as we can. We are holding every coffee and conversations at Village from here through construction will just be an open forum for construction questions. So the next one's on Monday. So we'll be there and ready for that. We're about to show the residents they've seen the furniture options, and I think we're having swatches and such at the next meeting as well, if I recall. So hopefully that's an exciting part for the residents, but I also expect to get feedback to this thing. But we are moving on schedule. The moves are on schedule. I think we just finished the 3rd wing, so we're partway through the unit turns. And so I think we've really got it down at this point of what the expectations are for the units when Pinker, how they leave them. The workmanship has been great. There's just been things because we've done punch list walks and then they have time for corrections and then residents move in. There were some things that they didn't complete. There was just still some items that we had identified that weren't yet done. And what we really were trying to do is minimize going back into residence units. So we're trying, I think we've gotten that dialed in by now, which is good. And we've got property management and maintenance also doing their own punch list walk too, and they've got a checklist running to make sure they get everything that they have in mind addressed as well. We're getting ready to do some samples, brick stain samples on the exterior, so we'll start to see what it looks like on the outside, and they're prepping to do exterior work probably starting in June. And getting that moving. The parking lot will get closed for a period of about 3 weeks. And so we're working to see if residents can temporarily park at the spoke parking garage. So we're working with LDDA and BCHA to get that arranged. Of course, Kaufman Street is also in rough shape at the moment. I should say I'm gonna sneeze, sorry. Excel is moving gas lines right now, so it's all torn up. But it is officially open for access. So we knew that there was going to be some construction overlap, so we're just making the best of it. So everything is moving as it's supposed to. Construction is tough, but right now we're also, we have a pretty healthy contingency budget on this one because it's a big project, and so we're making calls right now on what's our wish list items for ways to use up that contingency. So I'm sorting that through.
What about like disability parking on that? With the parking lot shut down, are they still gonna have to go over the spoke in that, or is there gonna be something
For the
available?
Center for People with Disabilities?
Well, no, I'm just saying,
ADA
is there any of our residents that use the disability parking? Is there
Yes.
gonna be some place close that they can access,
Yes.
or is it?
And so what I would like to do is, because, I mean, it's very easy to coordinate this with the city. What I'd like to do is try and, I can't necessarily reserve an ADA, but the turnaround area, that is public parking. And I feel like we could try and talk to LDDA about making some priority parking there for ADA use. But I don't know if you're allowed to reserve ADA parking. Probably not, right? So let me look into that a little closer, because you're right, spoke parking would not be
It's not
ideal for
ideal,
that,
but
right?
yeah.
So, I'll look into that too. Just to make a quick note of myself. Any other questions about village? We'll be done with construction here in end of September. Ascent, the big news is we got the Early Childhood Education Center fully funded, which is so exciting. Even as of February, we set so many balls up in the air still. I really hope this comes together. And it did. So, and we still have, that's before we even, Longmont Community Foundation wanted to get involved in this as well. And we fully funded it before they had a chance. So they are now, we're kind of switching gears, and they're going to be working with Wild Plum Center to help furnish and get all there's a lot more to do still. It's not just building the shell. There's a lot of stuff to put in the building in the ECE. So they're going to be working with Wild Plum to support them in getting all of their fixtures, equipment, and that type of thing. So it's happening.
Where did the funding come through?
We got $2 million from the Colorado Health Foundation, which is wild and so great. We had $350,000 from Boulder County Sustainability, which is kind of serving the whole thing, but that's where the gap that needs to be filled. We have $150,000 from Boulder County Worthy Costs, $525,000 from the city using their ARPA funds. So I put together a summary for the board a while back. Still feel like I'm gonna sneeze. We asked for $9 million, and it took over a year and a half or so to get to the $3 million mark. So, funding for early childhood education is few and far between. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a priority by the government.
It's a priority, but there's like nothing out there. Certainly nothing. We applied for state funding, didn't get anything. We just declined. It's just crazy to me. But thank goodness the Colorado Health Foundation, they funded it because they specifically want affordable housing with a direct tie to early childhood education and daycare. So, thank goodness. So exciting. So we are speeding along to closing now, where it's getting intense, which is typical. The projected closing is mid-July, and so we'll be doing a lot of work between now and then to get to that point, and construction will start soon after that. Any questions on that, Cindy? Other than that, we've got stuff in the hopper, but this is really our, in the last, since May 2022, when we closed on Chrisman, I guess June 2022, we had Chrisman close and start construction, which they are cutting their ribbon on in June. Actually, we should make sure that you're included on that. And then we had Xenia come along within a year after that, and Xenia is going to finish construction early in September, so we'll be opening that up. We're starting lease up already, and that will be open in October. And then moved into Village 6 months later, and so that's ongoing. And then Ascent here another 6 months later. It's been, for a small organization with a small development team, that's pretty wild to have 4 projects in 2 years. So it's very exciting. It's a ton of work. And from now on, after we get through Ascent closing and Village construction completed, we're working on the next phase, but it's a little bit further out, where we're still in pre-development on some stuff. The Atwood project that we're just partnering on, they're going to reapply for tax credits in November, well, in August, find out by November. So we're assisting on that. So hopefully that would get a funding award, and then we would have another one that's close to construction. And then we've got some land to figure out. We've got the Royal Mobile Home Park that we have to just time out in our projection schedule, and we have potentially by the end of the year, and this is all still in the city side, the Royal Mobile Home Park is still owned by the city, but it's dedicated for affordable housing. And then by the end of the year, we might have a land donation through the city's inclusionary housing program up on 19th and Terry. So we'll see by the end of the year if that's going to be finalized. And so we got to plan out the next couple of years, including a potential middle income project that's also in pre-development. So there's still a lot coming. I think that's my main updates on development. Any questions?
Any updates on Xenia too, or?
I'm sorry?
Any updates on Xenia? Is that just moving along?
Xenia's just moving along. It's ahead of schedule on construction. We're working on lease up. We're doing a lot of sessions with the PSH, Permanent Supportive Housing Consultant, that Element has hired to help them, design the project and now implement. And so between Boulder Shelter, Mental Health Partners, Bo Simone Consulting, PSH Consultant, Element, and us, we're meeting every week to go over, to finalize our tenant selection plan, get on the same page about procedures, and how, this is the first time that LHA has managed a project that it doesn't have ownership interest in. And so it's different. It's definitely different. We are not making the calls on some of the elements that we are used to making calls on. For example, if a unit ends up meth contaminated, it's not our financial responsibility. We are a key player in figuring out what to do, but it's just a different element. So we're making sure that everybody gets on the same page before we get started. We want to all be aligned. And so that's what we're working on heavily right now.
And who's going to be managing it, the wait lists and stuff like that, or will they
Boulder
be?
Shelter.
Okay.
So half of the tenants will come through the local coordinated entry, exiting from homelessness. Half of them will come from the statewide one home list. And so it'll be a combo of people with local ties and some who may not have.
And then on LHA's website, are we just going to, if you want additional resources or wait lists, they're just pointing to that?
So there is no wait list. There's
Okay.
no wait list because they're pulling from these
Okay.
specific people that are going through this exiting homelessness
Right,
process.
okay, sure. Right.
So I think we will certainly have something on our website
That's a resource.
announcing it and telling people, if you're interested, this is who to go talk to. But it's going to be based on specific, not qualifications, but specific circumstances that you're in. on that list.
For the mental health partners, are they gonna have their own feed in as well, or is it mainly through?
It's gonna be different. Nope, mental health partners will not be doing, Boulder Shelter will be pulling all the references for people. Well, the mental health partners is just going to administer the vouchers. They're not, it's going to be a different role than at the suites. They are just, whoever Boulder Shelter brings in, then LHA will do our screen for tenancy, and then MHP will come in last. And they have very minimal screen at that point, based on the requirements around the funding for those vouchers, which is state funding. They don't have as many strings attached as at the suites. And so it'll primarily be Boulder Shelter doing the first pass, LHA doing the second pass.
Will the Boulder Shelter have case managers and all that?
Yeah, they're providing supportive services. This is the model for how PSH is supposed to be structured and funding structure, which the suites is a very old model. And so we have services funded for 5 years within the project budget, and then at the 5-year mark, the city's human service agency funding has made a commitment to help fund it, but it will be Boulder Shelter performing supportive services on site. We'll have people on site during business hours every day. Which is good. On that note, one of the hard parts for us is sorting through how the suites and Zinnia are different, because they have totally different funding structures and different requirements that go along with that. But what we are doing is we've been interviewing for the 3 clinicians that we're going to post at the suites, and so we're very close to having people on site. We have a new community manager there, Jonna, who has a ton of experience in property management, especially with the populations that we see at the suites. And then we've posted for an assistant community manager as well, because once we have both properties, we'll have Jonna be the manager for both and an assistant, so we'll have added capacity. And we want that assistant on board before we lease up so they can assist in that process. So we've got 1 position out there, 3 clinicians also out there, but in interviews, and we're about to have a very robust staff of the suites, which is really exciting compared to the long history of the suites being constantly under-resourced. So
We're gonna have security that's in these things for these suites.
Yep.
Same schedule.
yeah, they're on our existing contract.
So Zinnia is covered under our contract right now for walkthroughs of the construction site overnight, but when they get their temporary certificate of occupancy, that's going to drop off our contract, and then Zinnia will have to, the project will then contract with the security company for 24-hour security front desk. So it won't be under LHA's contract anymore because the property itself will need to carry that cost. So that'll save us. I mean, they're paying for that service. They're getting invoiced for the construction walkthroughs right now. So yeah, that'll be 24-hour security.
Well, then you mentioned the screening process. There's 3 different levels of screening. Is that just paper, or is a person having to go through interviews with the 3 different agencies?
It's primarily
Paper. Okay.
So what we're still sorting out exactly what it'll be. But what it might look like is Boulder Shelter confirms that they qualify as, they meet the definition of homelessness that is attached to this funding source, which is a whole thing in and of itself. There's multiple definitions of homelessness. And so they will make sure of that. And then we will come in, and what we are still negotiating, but what we are hoping for is we perform a criminal background check. Whether we look at rental history is still being talked about. But we will at least confirm that for tenancy, it's a low barrier to entry. That's the point. But that there isn't something that is a major concern before they're a tenant. And then MHP they have to do a very minimal screening process for the voucher.
So for the criminal history check, there's specific, like crimes or violations that we're just saying more violent crimes. I guess would be my first question, and then the second is, so we're the ones like the LHA is doing that, the background checks, right? Not that. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So
Who actually does those checks? Is that Lisa?
yes, it is our property management team. I think we're looking at ways right now, like, does that make sense? Should it be at the regional property manager level? Could we have it better? Could we make the process better? We're looking at all that. We're also trying to get a new background check company, which is shockingly a really big challenge to get one that pulls the information that you're actually wanting. So just to give I mean, this is all still in draft form in negotiation. But the hard stops at this point are if you've been convicted of a drug-related criminal activity for manufacture, production, distribution. I think we're still talking about how possession plays in, but certainly those basically making meth or selling meth.
Within what time? 7 years?
5 years.
And it has to be a conviction.
It has to be a conviction. It cannot be just an arrest.
And it's any drug, right? Not just meth, or is it, they're really looking at that stuff?
Schedule 1 drugs.
Schedule 1 drugs, okay.
So meth, I mean,
Which
all hard
weed
stuff.
still is,
Weed.
right?
Marijuana, well, it's still considered federally Schedule 1, but we'll
Right.
see what plays out. Marijuana's looked at differently.
Yeah, I know, it's somewhat nonsensical, but, okay.
If someone, this is also draft where we're at. If someone has ever been evicted for reasons related to meth, they will be automatically denied, but you can appeal because we do want to take into account if someone's gotten treatment or there are lots of circumstances that might come into play. And then if you're a lifetime registered sex offender, not necessarily not lifetime, which is how the suites is right now too. So those are the big ones so far.
The difference with this property is that it's state housing vouchers, they're not federally funded. And so they're balancing and trying to make the state happy.
And they'll take a lot more.
They're willing to accept more, and we're trying to protect ourselves too, so we're having those conversations.
Federal funding brings in more limitations, and that is what the suites is operating under.
The eviction process, I assume, is going to be done by the project grant by Lisa's group.
Which process?
Eviction.
Yes.
And is there special considerations under that, since this is the exit to homelessness?
So it's the same as the suites in terms of it is permanent supportive housing, meaning you are supposed to be, it is not, you balance fair housing rule, federal fair housing, with the fact that it's permanent supportive housing and there is a leniency there for certain lease violations. Because it is understood that people are going to make mistakes because they are trying to get their life back on track, and sometimes they're coming from either challenging situations related. There could be a myriad, and they're either in recovery or coming from a tough financial situation, or there's a lot of reasons.
So what
Yes.
gets you evicted in Spring Creek will not be the same?
Yes, correct. These are high acuity of need populations generally, and we know that they're at the highest risk of being chronically homeless. And so when you do a permanent supportive housing development, you are accepting that you are attempting to help the hardest to house. And so it has a different threshold. It's a really tough line too. So we're talking to Zinnia Element about that. It's really up to them. They're the owners. I think we went through this process 2 years ago where we talked to legal to say what's our risk factors here. They're going through that process now. So it's nothing we didn't do. We came to the conclusion that the risk was low if you go down a certain path with it and use it in a certain way. So we'll wait and see. I hope so. It's also a financial commitment that they didn't really plan for. So, but it's part of their risk tolerance. So we'll see if they.
So it's units, right?
It
That's a
is.
financial commitment as well.
Yeah.
Probably
So
just
that is-
one or two units would cover the whole cost of it.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Easy.
And you're gonna have it with consent.
I know. So something we're trying to do with the whole group is, what do you see in your day-to-day work? the Boulder Shelter works with the people in a personal level. They see what goes on. They don't necessarily know what a meth impacted unit, what the impact of that is. So, and Element doesn't either. Element has done Bluebird. It's been open since January, which is a sister project to this one in Boulder. And so they're seeing how things work and how they go in PSH. And so we're just trying to get into this relationship building phase where everyone kind of understands, where are you coming from? What do you see every day that makes you take this stance on something? So we're in the midst of that right now. Because I don't think that we've historically been very transparent and vocal about what the meth impacts are. But if you're a case manager, either from MHP, Boulder Shelter, and you're working even at Hope, working with people directly, they don't necessarily know what we're dealing with a meth unit. So I'm trying to say, you know, a single smoking in a unit one time could be $5,000 cleaning, like minimum. And they don't realize that. They don't hear that part. They see one phase of it and we see one phase of it, and we gotta make sure everybody knows what's going on across the board. Because it's just how you, and it can impact how you talk to your clients about it. Like they have expressed, like when they know someone is using meth or fentanyl, they're saying, "You're being a real jerk here. Like this is not cool." And I go, "Yes, and it's $250,000. Like that's more than not cool." So it's just information sharing and storytelling about what actually happens in this world, so that everyone's going in eyes wide open and has a plan for how to handle it that we're all on board with.
So
That's what we're getting.
now, my understanding from these meetings is that we have some specialized insurance, which is got a lot of limitations to it. And that's what my question is, it completely going away now?
Completely done.
Oh, well,
We are no longer a moneymaker for an insurance company.
Just out of curiosity, Element is separate though, right? So they could, it's part of their decision-making process.
They could. They also don't have insurance for it. Nobody does anymore.
It's just
No
outright.
one.
They don't
Yeah.
offer.
So, but so it's part of their risk tolerance.
Yeah.
And so we're just trying to share information about our experience so they know what they're getting into and how to plan for it. Because it's not just the $250,000, it's plus a year of a unit not generating income, which then the investors are impacted by. And so it's a big,
Well, not only that,
It's a
it's not
challenge.
just to house people, and you have all these down units, so
Exactly.
housing people, and then you're really defeating the purpose of
Yep.
housing, right?
Yep.
I mean,
so it plays to all of the elements. It plays to, you know, the mission, it plays to the finances, it plays to the tax credit program and how that works with PSH. It's really, really, really complicated.
Does it feel like they don't understand the seriousness? Or is it just still you're trying to get them to understand?
Trying to get them to understand. I think we have been generally on the same page about meth. It's just making sure that everyone knows, eyes wide open, when the inevitable day comes that we have a tenant that we know has used meth in the unit, how do we approach it? What do we do? So that we're all on the same page.
It just seems important that we want them to address it, not just on or think about approaching it not just on a personal level. Like, I get that, that's what they're doing, they're interacting with just, trying to figure out the best thing for this person in recovery, but yeah, that's sort of what I was thinking. Like, maybe that they don't take it seriously, it's just not the lens in which they view, like you said, the mission of their
Right.
work, I guess. I don't know, but I
Yeah.
think that could be problematic.
They're worried about the individual, not the community. Or the safety of everyone, and the building itself.
Which I get, because their life's work is to house this person that is hard to house. And if they're unsuccessful and they're just coming back straight into they're always, rotating in and out and having to fulfill that mission with that person again. And so there is no right answer to all of this. There's give and take and picking the line that meets everybody's goals the best. PSH is very hard. Very hard. I don't even think that we've had this conversation. We don't think that even low-income housing tax credit programs don't work with PSH. Like, if you have to have a unit rent ready, if not filled or rent ready by the December of each year to get the tax credits on the unit for the next year. If you have a meth unit, what are you supposed to do with that? You can't lose the tax credits on PSH. That is going to kill the project, and it is a tugging point. So. And if you don't have investors, how do you build PSH? And then you have to keep the investors happy, or else the project's you have to be financially successful. So, the problem of our age that I don't know if we'll solve in our lifetimes all the way, but we'll do our best. One step at a time. All right.
So let's go on to item 6, items for input to the LHA Board of Commissioners, suites land option.
Turn it off here. I just wanted to circle back on this because we brought the conversation up to the LHA board very briefly. I did agree last time, Arlene specifically had asked to have kind of a blurb of the options, which I have not prepared fully yet, but I thought I would just talk about the options that the board was discussing. And then we're not making any calls on this anytime extraordinarily soon, but I just wanted to circle back to you with what they mentioned. So it's going to take me a quick second here to pull up our. Sorry, you see the sausage making here. This is why you pull this up before the meeting.
So on the 9 pages?
Sorry about this. Figure it out. Oh, the option, that's what it is. Oh, all right. This is just a reminder of the land that we're talking about. Backside of the suites. All right, so it's this proposed building in orange, give or take 63 units. So what the board talked about at their last meeting, when we were just brainstorming, but some of the options that came up is first, when we took the LHA board members about a year and a half or so ago, took them down to Denver to do a tour of Arroyo Village, which is a tax credit project that has a small shelter, just overnight shelter, attached to PSH units, attached to traditional affordable housing. And they really tacked on to the idea that if you could have that all in one place and show the graduation from one to the next, it offers hope for the people entering that shelter that they could do what they are seeing right next door. That was a really cool project, and they were in a qualified census tract, which meant that they got the shelter covered by tax credits within basis, which is really a critical funding mechanism because funding for shelters is not just lying around out there. And Longmont does not have a permanent shelter. Boulder Shelter officially serves Longmont, but a lot of Longmont folks do not want to go down to Boulder. It's too far. Hope does operate, and some others operate emergency shelters around, but we do not have a permanent shelter. So that is something, with a city of 100,000 without a shelter, there is a case to be made for having one. Now there's a lot more behind that comes through the HSBC and the regional partnerships and the homeless services side of things. But generally that was attractive to several members of the board. The problem though is we're not in a qualified census tract, so this shelter could not get funded at this site if we did something like that. So there's this big financial challenge on this one for that type of option, but that was still something that specifically the mayor has had in mind since that tour. We talked about doing traditional affordable housing back there, and that was really just to balance out the population concentration. And then the last target population that came up that we had at least 4 members in support of looking into was targeting youth. Those aging out of foster care. There is the group Together, focuses on youth homelessness or youth exiting foster care, a lot of just target in that area, and they just opened something really cool in downtown Denver that Penrose, who's our development partner on Ascent, Penrose and Together did a project right down there by Coors Field that is targeted towards youth, and it's just really cool. Some of the reasons that's a population that's underserved here, and B, there was some comments made about how they might be a little more resilient to the being on site with 130 or so units of permanent supportive housing. But there are opinions all over the place. It could be they're definitely resilient to and more willing, I should say, if you have some traditional affordable housing, the marketing next to permanent supportive housing, whether we want to say that's real or not, it's real. There might be a harder time attracting families because there's 130 units of permanent supportive housing next door. Just to be real, when our market studies would show this eventually. But the idea was that youth might be more resilient to that idea. There's also the other side that youth might be susceptible to influence, and we're trying to not concentrate too much without doing it extremely well. And so there's a toss-up of whether that is the right target population for this area. Either way, across the board, service center, life skills, bringing services to that site is a huge priority. So we could certainly do that if we did services on the bottom and units on the top. That could serve the whole campus. That's very desirable from everyone. And we've already also talked about city facilities there, like housing and human services, even for nonprofits in the public sector in this area, are all challenged for space. So if we could bring a presence on site that is in that service realm, but also serves some city need, that also might be a way to bring in more funding to do it. And the ultimate backup, which we didn't necessarily dig into this with the board, but the ultimate backup is if we can't find a target population that we think works, maybe it's a service center, completely services related. That's the end all be all backup plan if we can't figure out the target population. So I just wanted to get feedback on that for when we do actually end up making a call. And again, this one is also subject to Element, because they have the option on this land, and if they are still interested, they need to start making moves. There's a chance they will let the option expire. We can't really tell. But if they want to take advantage of the option, then they have to start prepping for a tax credit application pretty soon. If they're going to go for a 9%, that'd be February 25. And so they have to start making plans. So is there any reactions to some of those brainstorming ideas from the board?
Well, I think in the past you said in order to be viewed more favorably from CHAFA, you've got to have some incorporation in services.
Oh yeah.
Right. So
Yeah,
that's a given regardless of the target population, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what you mentioned a qualified census tract, is that what it was?
Yeah.
And this isn't qualified, is there?
No. So
They get them written though,
they do, but this area will never be it.
This one.
so it's so commercial.
What is so frustrating about qualified census tracts is they are population based, so income based, I should say, based on population. So they do shift. HUD sets the qualified census tracts. They do change every year. So we've had like a North Main area. We've had some tracts go in and out of a qualified census tract. Generally, most of our qualified census tracts are focused on North Main and just east of Main. Everything on the outsides has not been on a qualified census tract for a long time. And so this site, it's down in Southwest Longmont. It's higher incomes. It's not going to become one. But what is frustrating is you get it's a funding incentive to be in a qualified census tract, but that also means that in a community like Longmont, that means the incentives to build affordable housing are where the incomes are already low, which does make sense in one aspect, but in another aspect, it's concentrating instead of dispersing throughout town. So it makes projects a super challenge anywhere outside of the Main Street corridor. Ascent is not in the qualified census tract, which is why we had to fundraise for the ECA ourselves. If it was in a qualified census tract, then the ECE would have been covered on a tax credit basis. So there would be, other than services that directly impact the residents on site, if we brought in anything that's more of a community impact, like Hope or anything like that, we would have to bring in another funding source.
I like the services-based model with the youth, maybe. So, I mean, it could give us additional options. And especially if youth are underserved in our community, obviously we don't have any of our units that was focused strictly on them. It could be a win for us. And I mean, Chafflin might also look upon it pretty favorably as well.
Right.
For serving underserved community as well.
Vouchers.
Yep.
Project-based vouchers.
Which right now are
Hard to come by.
slim pickings.
Well, could we also, I mean, could we get state funding at all? I mean, would that
think
be an
that's-
option as well? Could we split Fed and state for a project?
Especially if it's targeted towards youth that are either exiting homelessness or foster care, thank you, then that is worth talking to DOH, like what kind of vouchers are out there for that. Does that qualify as PSH? These are good questions to dig into. This is what we're kind of circling the wagons around. And Element will dive into this as well. I know Element already has a relationship with Together. They brought up the idea of Together 2 years ago and asked if we would be interested in doing something like that.
Is there a way to is it Arroyo Village? Was it down in Denver?
Arroyo.
They're the ones with the shelter.
Yeah. So is there a way to kind of mirror that so that you've got your permanent supportive housing folks looking at the next step up, but you're also bringing in the entry level, like the first off the street?
We can certainly try.
Is that too much
Funding
for
the
us?
shelter is going to be tough. That's a big price tag with not a lot of sources out there.
And that would limit the number of units.
Yeah.
And I think community support that.
It's hard.
Like, I think you
it's-
might get a little.
It's a heavy lift.
I'm not sure that, and a huge concentration in the same population.
So it's such a double-edged sword because this site, we're trying to balance concentration, but it also has no neighbors that nobody spoke out against Zinnia. It's in its isolated little pocket. Now, this land is proposed for development right now, private development, townhomes. So that will be a challenge.
We need to get in there before they do.
Yeah.
I think it's different saying, I think the greater community doesn't really understand what supportive housing is, but they definitely understand what
Homeless
shelter
shelters.
is. Yeah. So I'm not,
And
I think that would be.
And getting into shelter talks is much broader than this group. That is a big group with a lot of key input and things like that. So we are one cog in the big wheel.
City-led project at this point.
Exactly.
We don't have the funding resources.
Yeah, we would just be like, okay, we'll
Try
help
it out.
manage this project. You guys handle all. You guys meaning city and other partners related in the world of sheltering. We'll get the units built, the LHA, get the units built, you come in with this. It would still be a big partnership and we would still be involved just like we are in all of our partnerships, but it certainly is not LHA running a shelter. So, still an idea to do. it would probably take more time because they would have to do a lot of community building and a lot of funding work. They would have to, it's a much bigger process to bring a shelter than go with housing and services.
So you're talking about how it could be, like at the very beginning, aspirational almost for, people coming in a shelter and seeing that there's, paths forward. Could you imagine any, as talks go on, like concrete ways that a shelter like that would, however it's being managed, not by LHAAB, I understand that, but set up some sort of program or even just conversations about getting people from there into the units?
Oh, yeah.
So it would be something that was some formal structure about that, or a formal application process or whatever, or even just a goal that they're looking at.
Yeah, we would certainly have case management that would help usher that. That's the ideal, is to have this capped graduation. So I'm hearing there's still interest in youth plus services, still shelters on the table as a path of interest. And the graduation factor. So does that mean that shelter plus traditional?
The youth and the traditional.
I mean, we can't, it's a target population. We can't deny somebody unless it comes with unless there's a specific voucher out there for youth, which I don't think there is.
I think there might be.
That would be
level.
smart.
I feel like there is, because when I went to a grand opening for Maker Housing, that they had specific youth vouchers.
When I worked in the shelter,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are
That'd be
vouchers for them, and then you can't deny, but you can target services as a
Right.
way with state
Yeah.
vouchers to.
And one way is
Very
just,
one.
you build the building, just like we're building a cent to be family friendly, but we're not going to turn away someone without a family. You can do the same for.
If they're exiting the voucher, the specific voucher, it goes up to 20.
Okay. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, they get the voucher for a certain number of years, and then they can extend it for like 2 years. Yeah.
Up until 25. Yeah, so it's like 18, and then it's 2 years, you can go up to age 25. If you've aged out.
And I'm sure Together has got this.
We just need to have a conversation.
I do think Element they've got their hands full at the moment. So I think once Zinnia's lease up is well underway, then they'll be ready to start digging in.
Do we extend that?
Not yet. We don't have to yet. It doesn't extend to the end it doesn't expire to the end of 2025.
Oh, okay.
It's just that if they're going to exercise the option, they have to start planning now. So. Okay. Thanks for the feedback. There'll be more to come. This is just to solidify our brainstorming and see what routes to start digging into. Okay.
So number 7, resident quality of life. A is emergency procedures. Do you want to table this? Because I know.
I was going to propose it
Okay.
because I pulled our emergency procedures from 2012.
Okay.
It doesn't even have Spring Creek and Fall River. It references project management being contracted out to Hudson Company. It is the only thing that's applicable is the floor plans
Okay.
and exit routes.
Okay.
So I think, and plus because Arlene
Yeah,
requested
Arlene was
this,
the one that wanted
I feel like we could bring this back and have a more meaningful conversation.
Okay.
So clearly, what we will have, we have access to, the city has an entire emergency plan and a whole team that we can dip into to help us make this more meaningful and updated and not a bunch of restrictions.
Okay.
So I am glad that Arlene brought that up because clearly it is in need of some updates.
Okay.
All right, sounds good.
And then preparation for affordable homeownership opportunities.
So Harold has mentioned this a couple times. It's not an LHA sponsored project, but the city is sponsoring a homeownership new development that's going to be 185 units, of which 55 are permanently deed restricted affordable, all for sale. This on the city side, we're putting together, we're ramping up because we have a portion of the units get to be set aside, whether they're in the affordable or the middle income range, get to be set aside for city employees. Got a preference because the city invested in exchange for that. But then we want to really build up that pipeline. The idea is we want those affordable units to have a line out the door. And so the first phase, it's been sailing through the entitlements process. It's like such a good example of how to work together with a developer to make projects great. They should be breaking ground on the infrastructure in September and then having their first units for sale next spring, like I'm gonna say May-ish. And so what we are working on the city's housing side is a process for a lottery system, a wait list, doing all our pre-qualification stuff, working with preferred lenders that would be advantageous to, trying to reduce closing costs and such for these folks that are coming into the affordable units, and coming up with the down payment assistance program to help people get in as well. For those that are this is all for people under 80% AMI for those 55 units. So one pipeline that we want to develop is our residents in LHA properties that are at the higher end of the income range, have had successful tenancies, and if they're interested in homeownership, affordable, permanently deed restricted homeownership, helping them start the process to get on that list. What that will mean is we'll be looking at them with down payment assistance, and we've got the personal finance counseling resource through Boulder County that the city pays for, that we want to get everybody into those classes and those counseling services to get them prepared for home ownership on the finance side. So I just wanted to ask this group what ideas you might have for us to roll out such a program. Our seniors at our senior properties most likely are not going to be the ones interested in this. But we do have families at AMN. We have one family we know of that's graduated out and on the income side. That's the ideal, is graduate just like the other project that we're talking about to the next better housing opportunity. And so I just wanted to run by this group and see if you had any ideas for us as we think about rolling something out.
Yeah, we could focus on just marketing it to anybody in AMN or anybody on our voucher system too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think one aspect that we could help with, if we could fund it, this would not be LHA, but almost like a dedicated, not a case manager, but someone to help the process. I worked in real estate really over a decade before I bought my first house, and it was gone. Just because you're thinking as the first time home buyer, not like real estate paralegal. And so it was a lot of document gathering, knowing which questions to ask that people just don't have experience with. And from my experience working with the Circles program, people exiting generational or situational poverty, a lot of the basis of that program was just being that support system to help them navigate systems, going to the bank and opening a bank account. What does that look like? Maybe you've never had a bank account your entire life. So just providing some supports for people to rely on and help with would be a great asset to them being successful.
So the housing counseling group does do a good portion of that. We also have a dedicated homeownership specialist here. Granted, it won't be all of the buyers at once because that would be way too much. We expect 10 affordable units in the first phase. So it would be, spread out over a period of 3 to 5 years. So I hope between those two, I think we're going to identify more needs. But between having a lender that's participating purposefully, because they want to, there are lenders in this area that have tried to delve into the first-time home ownership market and help people. There's Cornerstone Lending does the Start to Home program, and then I know there was one more bank that was working on something. I can't recall what it was exactly. It hasn't fully been rolled out. And then the developer has a lender too that's been working with him on deed restricted stuff. Not necessarily affordable, but other deed restricted. So we're gonna get together with them to say what do you have in mind. But I think, and there's gonna be, we're trying to figure out real estate agent relationship as well, because that's obviously another piece of the fees at least.
And Christy and I started a conversation with Tom Kimball at Title Company, Land Title.
Advantageous title fees too.
To start the conversation of how do we reduce fees? What does that look like? What can we reduce because they're beholden to, you know, Old Title, Old Republic, and other underwriters.
Would it be helpful for like on the living side, there's kind of, this is a townhome community, so there'll be HOAs.
Yeah.
And I read some things about people saying kind of being first and ownership because kind of older, actually going into foreclosure, inability to pay HOA dues, and especially now with like insurance costs and you know what happens if there's a special assessment. So you put these people in these homes and then they can't, and then they're foreclosed on because they can't meet the monthly obligation when it comes to HOAs, or even home ownership. How do you replace your water heater, furnace, AC, and all those? So would it be helpful if there was some kind of, at least from the lending side, like, I don't know, the cities has some kind of long-term investment in helping, I don't know, with some of those kind of things that are going to happen.
We're definitely aware of some of those challenges. So what we have done is the sales prices for these homes are backed into by working on the monthly payment that includes insurance, HOA, private mortgage insurance, all of the add-ons. We have worked backwards on the sales prices to make sure that that price would result in a monthly payment that's still affordable to this income level.
Those are variable costs, HOA dues, like they're not fixed.
They are, but we are very closely linked. We are funding the heck out of this project. We are working with them to build the HOA from the start where it would be still sustainable long term. That is one of the tenets of our partnership with them. Carol, we're talking about Mustang and trying to do home ownership prep for some LHA tenants that are ready or could be ready. So it's not fully solid because yes, HOA does have to be there, and yes, HOA dues typically increase over time. So what we're trying to do is work with the developer and say, don't make this so much maintenance required that the HOA is going to be out of this world on the design side. And then we are talking to them like that is a major concern of ours, making sure this HOA is sustainable long term. How do we plan for that? So it's not fully answered yet, but that is certainly in mind.
I would say from a lending side, there's, especially at the bank level, there is a huge push for CRA activity, so Community Reinvestment Act. And if you're working with a local bank, you can probably get some very tailored programs that are specific. And then when you're going through the lender kind of interview due diligence process, I would tell them that you want a dedicated lender that's going to be working with all of the homeowners instead of just, hey, we have a program, but we've got 7 different lenders that can help. Because they'll be able, if they have a dedicated person and they're always dealing with Molly, then Molly knows how to navigate, and when we get the city involved and when they send them to home ownership counseling and when they like do all those pieces in the right order versus fumbling their way through. And I would be happy to send you a list of local lenders that I think you could reach out to and say, hey, we want to talk about a dedicated program When I was with First Bank, we did that.
Mhm.
We've done it at A&B, and so I think that there's probably elevations. There's several that I would reach out to that I would say, hey, here's what we're doing, and can you build a program that fits this?
Yeah, one of the things on that, sorry I'm late, I was doing lawn issues. There's one bank that the Start to Home program here locally. I don't know if you've heard of that, where they reduce the fees for lending on anyone that works in Longmont connected. So we have some of our employees that have used it, but we're not sure where that program is. So we were thinking about that, but definitely trying to be a little more tailored in that, in terms of establishing a partnership and how we work with each other, because that's probably the biggest risk in this, is that when, more so on the affordable housing side, because it doesn't take much for somebody to be qualified and then not be qualified at closing. And so those, and really the attainable too, provide furniture for your house before you close.
Yeah.
And so understanding and working with those folks is incredibly important. So definitely want to chat with you as we get closer. But our hope is, I guess Juan said this, especially at Amen, some of the other properties on the permanently deed restricted, is to try to get folks moving into that wealth building component where they can.
So I think the first time we talk about marketing to HCB tenants and AMN, I mean, we can send it across the senior properties as well. We just don't expect a lot of interest. And then for those that are interested, we could start the personal finance counseling stuff right away.
Well, in line with that, I was thinking, our voucher holders and our residents, do we monitor how close they are to maybe exiting or reaching that upper threshold of not qualifying?
Yep.
Like if we could really target them.
Certifications and check their income every
Right.
year.
And I know it's a snapshot in time, and obviously stuff changes throughout the year and that, but we almost like target them first, and even like maybe if you have the resources, reach out to them directly and say, hey, have you considered this, and then see if it's an opportunity for them.
I wonder if people would be interested off the bat, or if it might feel like something that has been unachievable my whole life. It feels completely unachievable now. We might have we might need to do some work to get people thinking that the idea is even possible.
And something I brought up before was the PI program at Boulder County, personal investment. And I just sent it to you, Erica, but I don't know if you've looked at it before, but personal investment enterprise, where basically a family qualifies for this program. They have to plan to save $1,000 a year, and then that money is matched by the county as long as they follow through. And it can be up to $5,000 at the end of the program. That they can use for a down payment, they can use for education. So if we target people early enough, they can hold that money available for a down payment when the time comes. And that comes with homeownership education and counseling. It could be a really...
I think that's the same program.
Well, there's personal finance, which are just classes. This is something you have to qualify for and stay active in to get the matching grant money. And they open up a bank account, and then that money gets deposited. I think it's separate from personal finance too.
I think we talked about it before, but Impact Development Fund, I mean, they manage a lot of the down payment assistance programs statewide. And there might already be programs. If you go to their website, they've got a county by county map that shows what down payment assistance programs are out there.
Yeah, we know that we have multiple down payment assistance programs we can point people to. We should actually, when we're doing the marketing, list them all. Because we've got the home funded program through the city that's for Boulder County residents. We're going to be taking to council in June 25th a pilot locally funded program. If they're good with that, we'll start putting that together. Well, we kind of started formulating the idea already. And then there are state programs. You can get direct down payment assistance if you're middle income through the state, through a Prop 123 program. And there are other ones that are more broad and local, that we should really include all of those as options.
And a lot of them can be stacked. And so when you're marketing to the resident, if you've gone through the lender due diligence phase and said, hey, we would like you to help customize this program, which again, a lot of the local banks will do that because there's such a focus on it, then you can actually give somebody an example and say, look, here's, you're under this income threshold, you qualify for this. This is the number you have to be able to save in order to get into that home. And that makes it real for them.
$1,000 down on my $40,000. The only gripe I have with down payment assistance programs is the city used to call it a grant a very long time ago. It wasn't a grant. They took the cost of the grant off of the price that they reset when you applied to leave. So you essentially pay it back. It's not a grant.
Yeah,
They changed that. They changed that since I bought my place in 2014. The other issue I have with DPA is the silent second mortgage, which is what I had on the house in Longmont, prevented me from refinancing and getting out of an FHA loan. Because then I'd have to, if we're gonna go that route, and this is my just personal hat, this has nothing to do with LHAAB, but if we're gonna go that route with the down payment assistance, I feel like whoever's doing that has to be willing to not get paid off in the event of a refinance, because then people can't reduce their monthly cost if they want to refinance to get a better rate or get a mortgage insurance. This FHA loan, you don't just graduate out of mortgage insurance unless you have a CHAPA.
It still charges it, it's just called something different.
Yeah, so unless you have a certain conventional CHAPA loan where you don't have to put down, you don't have to have 20% equity. If it's a traditional FHA mortgage, you're gonna pay mortgage insurance until you request it or refinance. So.
Yeah, silent seconds are kind of a double-edged sword. They're good from a perspective of, so for those who don't know, the silent piece means that you don't have a repayment during the life of the loan.
And doesn't accrue interest.
And a lot of times it doesn't accrue interest. So what that means is if you have somebody that's really tight from a qualification standpoint, they can't service that extra amount on a monthly basis, they can't qualify. But what they do then is they structure it so that they get their money back at the end. And sometimes it's like a shared appreciation. So if they provided a 5% down payment, then they get 5% of whatever that appreciation was, and that's how they get their revolving loan fund to operate. But that's the double-edged sword, right? They get 5% at the end, and who knows what that number is. So if you calculate an interest rate on that, it could be some huge number.
Yeah, I didn't get anything when I sold my house.
But you have to balance that against, well, yeah, but you couldn't have bought the house to begin with if you had to service that debt. So that's why it's tricky.
Yeah.
And my argument for it is if we can reduce the closing costs, because the down payment assistance doesn't actually go to the cost of the home. It covers the closing costs the day of closing, and then whatever's left, goes against the price of the home. So they're starting with almost no equity to begin with. Whereas the down payment assistance should be giving them the equity. So that's why we started the conversation. Christy and I started the conversation when we worked at BCHA with Tom. Entitled, how do we reduce the closing costs? Because it should not cost $20,000 to close on a home.
Yeah, that's why the Start to Home program is so important, because it's up to what? You get up to
I thought it was
$10,000.
$10,000.
I've heard of 30,000 or so, but just seeing we're chasing that program down right now because people still use it, but we're wondering
underutilized.
It's underutilized, and maybe finding other banks or something that's willing to replicate what they're doing, because they do cut anywhere from 10 to 30,000 off of the closing cost, which then lets the down payment really start applying to the principal on it. But trying to see if we can get other banks to replicate that.
25,000.
25,000.
It's not nothing.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty. We've had city employees that take advantage of it. It's a big difference.
And I'm someone who benefited from affordable housing. When I sold my condo, I lived there 4 years. The appreciation is capped at a certain number as measured by the city, and I still made $20,000 when I sold my condo. I didn't think that was gonna be anything. That allowed me to pay off my credit card debt after I bought my new home in Longmont for $390 core. That payment was doable. But then when I sold that house 4 years later, I was able to buy a $650,000 home in Louisville. So it was like, it does matter to get people in homeownership. So whatever we can do to help.
There's the wealth building aspect, and then there's also just the fixed rent costs, right? Like, yeah, the HOA can increase, but there's a fixed, you know what your rent's not gonna go up 10, 15, 20% per year. You know what your cost is gonna be.
That's the primary, when you're talking the affordable level, ideally you would walk out with some equity, but it is really, a lot of people, it's just to have permanent stability.
And the run on insurance is capped if it's affordable. Because my insurance costs on my condo are much lower than neighbors who live in non-affordable condos. Where I think you get into trouble is what you were talking about, special assessments being made, which you can get covered by homeowners insurance. Some homeowners insurance offer riders for that, because I signed up for it when I bought my condo. And then, in theory, we shouldn't have any mechanical issues within the first year for warranty. But if they stay there for 5 years and they have to replace their roof because of a terrible hailstorm, which is a real thing, they might not have $2,000 to put towards that.
We had a huge snow year, so snow and then it was $1,000 for snow removal that year. We have to go find somewhere.
Yeah. So some kind of revolving loan fund for those homeowners would be nice. Low interest.
My only concern with this is, like you mentioned earlier, that you can't refinance, possibly, right?
Well, you can.
You can, okay, I was just saying, with mortgage rates being so high as they are right now, I mean, there's gotta be.
The problem is if you have that silent second
You have a
mortgage,
silent section.
and the requirement is that you have to pay that back
Okay.
in order to refinance.
So we've written in our DPA program that we're the locally funded, the one that we are just formulating, but the repayment often is only if you're doing cash out refinance. If you're refinancing
For a lower rate.
for a lower rate, we don't require it back. If it's a reverse mortgage, because you're trying to stay housed, we don't always require that back either. It's really only if you're doing cash out.
And it's not free to refinance, which was my argument, was like, well, why am I gonna bother refinancing? I have a decent rate, and I'd have to pay off this $20,000 loan. It's gonna cost me $3,000 to do it. Financially, it doesn't make sense. Homeowner in that situation might not know that.
Yeah, and I think part of it, I mean, we're still in the front end of this, but the developer and I talked a little bit about considering, I mean, I've always been for this too. We think we're going to do a lottery because
There's gonna be so many people.
there's going to be so many people that are interested, but then, you know, I really think if we could get, you know, one or two lenders and maybe do something to have them come in and structure what we want on the front end for them to compete, because we know there's value based on, you know, you mentioned, I forgot what the program is, the requirements that the lenders have to hit in terms of who they're providing loans to.
CRA?
Yeah.
We know there's value to it, and if we could take 188 homes and say, you each get 94, and structure a program with a couple of lenders, I think we can probably get something pretty balanced and stable for the people who are buying it. And that's probably what we're going to start. I think we get the final or planning step tonight. Then we're starting to bring these other components together. And operationally, from a HOA perspective, I think I'm gonna have to go back to planning commission. But the operational costs are lower because we reduced green space, we reduce so many different components on that from a broader sustainability perspective, the traditional cost of the HOA will be lower because you're not going to have as much to maintain. And that's part of that more urbanized development standards, because we realize that's a costing too.
And on that note, it's really about balance. Like, we're not trying to take away green space, because that's also beneficial for residents, especially in affordable housing communities. You don't want it to not have opportunities for green space, but it's more thoughtful green spaces, not necessarily landscape strips and the stuff that's not necessarily used.
Not my neighborhood where I have acres and acres of green space. Our costing every time water rates go up.
Okay.
Alright, let's go on to LHA reports, operational updates.
So I'll take this one. I hate looking at this form every month and talking about it, because a lot doesn't change given our meth units, and I recognize that. But I will say we are getting much better at working through our wait list to fill units. We did open our wait list for Briarwood to get 2 of those units rented out. And we are actively working through the wait list at Village on Main to start filling units that are going to be vacant after everyone has moved back in or transferred to a different unit, because we've been holding those pending re-syndication. You can see we have no vacancies at a couple of properties. Most of the vacancies are from people moving out or meth. Working through the meth issues, which are always hard given funding. One thing I would say is that we are not having coffee and conversations at Aspen Meadows this week. Aspen Meadows Senior, we're just a little strapped on staffing and capacity. So I've rescheduled Center for People with Disabilities to come next month, because they were coming to all our properties in May. So I've already taken care of that, and John's working on alerting residents. But it's kind of a business as usual for a lot of the properties. I won't read the property updates to you. You can read them, but we do have a lot going on. We are actively recruiting and about to start interviewing for the assistant manager positions. With John accepting the position at Fall River Spring Creek after Greg's departure, we now have an assistant manager position open. That was his, and then we're starting to look for the assistant manager that will work with John at the Suites in Zinnia when that comes on. So we're hoping to have interviews next week for that. We got some great options. We also have a new maintenance tech who's starting May 17th or the 20th. We're trying to nail down his start date. He comes from, he had his own company doing construction and home building and rehab, and he has a degree in civil engineering, so it brings a lot of great knowledge. We're excited to have him start. We don't have much else to report based on the voluntary compliance.
We're waiting
for Briarwood.
We submitted everything to HUD in April 1st, and we have not heard anything yet, which is nice. We did just complete, so the LHA board is considering an add-on to the CDBG grant to do accessibility improvements. City is considering it tonight. LHA will consider it next Tuesday. But we've got the first project is done. We got the handrails done at the Briarwood. So we did a massive new ADA ramp, but then because of the new ramp configuration, we needed handrails. So we're still working through those capital improvements, and that being the first new one. So those were installed last Friday. So just going to be working through those grant funds for the next year.
Yeah, so I'll just jump in real quick on the operational report. I'm incredibly happy that we filled the position and that Lauren's in the position. So we're starting to get and deal with the issues that, frankly, we never had time to deal with. And sort of always dealing with the tyranny of the moment. So some things that really occurred as we were looking at it. One of the first shifts was moving maintenance reports to Lauren. really already starting to see some changes in that in terms of turnaround on certain issues, and with Patrick filling that position, really getting into the minutia and making sure the turns are occurring faster, working on something that we've been asking for, but really getting daily logs in terms of what we're doing from a maintenance standpoint, and then we started talking about transitioning into Yardi so that we can actually have all the work orders and maintenance in the system versus separate and apart. So just in that arena, I think, what we wanted to fill in the position with the assistant director, we're really getting it and then some, because we're moving faster on some things that we wanted to do. I think when we just start looking generally at more of the minutia and the operating areas, we're definitely seeing some different things and dealing with those things, but it's really starting to move faster actually, because of the work and the ability and the attention to detail that was just difficult for all of us other than working in the tyranny of the moment and dealing with the crisis points. And that being said, the crisis points still develop and we're still dealing with it, but I think it gives us the ability to parse it in a way that we weren't able to, where everybody can kind of take their components and work it, versus having to completely divert to a crisis moment and then you start getting behind on everything else. And so, really happy with where we are in this position. I know Kendra and I talked about this yesterday. We were looking at filling it not this year, but next year, just because of things we were seeing accelerated it, and I'm definitely glad that happened. And I think we're going to see a lot more coming out of it.
Talk for me, Mr. Council.
So does Briarwood have 2 units down for men?
I think I need to check with Patrick on those. We did scramble to get 2 of them ready to go, because we're leaving money on the table. I don't know if the 2 meth units that are outstanding are waiting on extensive work. I think the 2 that are available are ones that just needed cleaning, and that was done. So I need to check with them on those 2.
And that's one of the changes that is relatively new. So instead of meth units residing within like the regional property manager position in Lisa, we need maintenance of that, because that's really where they can, and Patrick needs to be involved in ensuring that. I just think it's a better fit there, and now it makes sense to do it.
And we're just actively filling right away now, right?
Yeah, we just opened the wait list.
Yeah, okay.
So we're working through it.
Update from Executive Director?
Well, that was a big part of my update, but I just jumped in on the operational piece.
Things are slowly getting better.
Just seeing that, I think, so the thing that's coming at us right now is trying to make sense of what came out of this legislative session, because there was a lot of legislation that was really dropping around housing, transportation, and those issues starting to morph together. So, and when you think about it, really think about it in terms of transit-oriented development. So on Senate Bill 184, obviously that was the legislation on that related to rail, Northwest Rail, Front Range Passenger Rail, and that really kind of set the clock on what that's going to look like, and at least for Northwest Rail or the northern part of FRPR, saying they wanted to have that operational within 5 years. So kind of mark that as the transportation piece. Associated with all of that is a lot of items related to housing in transit in transit or areas, transit-oriented development. And I think from the housing authority's perspective, it's going to cause a little bit, we're going to need to refocus because there's a lot of money sitting at the state, whether it's how they're looking at Prop 123 or how they're looking at some other components, and really utilizing those funds to build housing in transit areas. And so for us, and the piece is you're seeing housing authorities mixed in a lot of these programs where they want them involved in transit-oriented development. So I think globally, the theory is that if you have a transit station and you have bus and you have rail, and in Longmont's case, and you have microtransit, it makes more sense to have affordable, and I'm going to now say attainable housing in areas associated with transit, because you reduce the operating costs for the family units, because then they don't have to buy multiple vehicles or any vehicles because it's sort of in that area. So as we look at this, I think for us, when we look at future projects, transit-oriented development is probably going to be the key for us, just because that's how we're going to leverage our funds. And Molly, I think they passed the legislation on CHAFA and the middle income passed too. Mm-hmm. So now we're seeing that starting to drop into the equation, and really just thinking about how this all works in Longmont. So obviously for us, that's going to be the area of primary focus is going to be First and Main and that steam area near South Main Station, and how that's going to work. We're already looking at a project that I think we talked to you all about it. It was in the Middle Income Housing Authority program. That program has its own issues. And so we'll probably be coming back with the advisory board and the board, Housing Authority board itself, to kind of talk through some opportunities in this project that really could set a different course for the housing authority. In that case, and I'm being incredibly vague, because I'm probably going to need to set a joint executive session for both of these groups to talk through the nuance and the details on this project. But before we do that, we're trying to schedule meetings with financial advisors, so municipal government and financial advisors, people who will sell or bid the debt, to understand really what the parameters are and what the capacity is for the housing authority to jump in and do something like this, and essentially become an owner utilizing governmental financing mechanisms that, generally the ROI, let's say around year 8, starts spinning off, could theoretically spin off about $1 million a year in revenue, plus you've got the equity in the project, and could allow you to then use the equity that you have to then potentially do another type of deal like this in another transit-oriented area, which then starts tying into, from the city side, the Main Street redevelopment goals that the council set for us, especially one thing. And so, a lot of moving pieces, but I think we really need to dig into some of this legislation. But I did want to get it in your minds that we may have to schedule an executive session, and that would probably be an evening that we have the Housing Authority Advisory Board meeting that's starting like at 5:30. If people can work that into their schedule.
Just to add on, both the tax credit propositions went forward, not propositions, legislation went forward. So expanding the existing low-income housing tax credit and creating a new middle-income housing.
I know the eviction legislation went forward. There was a fair amount of amendments associated with it that it's not as bad as it was. It's not great, but that was something that again we're going to have to wrap our minds around a little bit. And then what else? There was another one.
Is that one about the renewing the lease?
That's the
too?
one, yeah.
Oh, that's the one?
It's for cause evictions.
Right, okay.
Can I ask you a question about that? I heard that there was a case between us in Boulder on Friday where the eviction was being challenged by the defendant against that law, the new law. You know anything about that? What the outcome was?
Katie didn't mention anything.
Okay, I'll check on that. I did do probably the first case on that last week, and it went to trial. And the judge ruled that there was no reciprocal part of the law. So the law took effect on the 19th of April or something. So anything that was filed before that could still move forward. I know there's a heated debate between the attorneys right now with that. I've been looking into it too, and I can't find where the documentation is that the defense attorneys think of this. But I know we've had a first case and the judge is expecting for a few more. That's a transit period. If it was filed before the 19th of April, as opposed to afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I think the people that are probably going to, what it's going to do, and we talked about it, and when we talked about this with the council, where you tended to be more lenient with tenants, you're going to be less lenient, and really have to stay on top of the issues, versus before where you could work with them and you could do certain things. This law doesn't give you the luxury to do that. And so from a management perspective, you're going to have to be on point from day one to make sure that you're dealing with the issues. And so I think the unintended consequence to this is that people who were landlords who may have worked with them are going to be the victims of this and the unintended consequences because they're going to get them on everything.
It's pretty much the general concept.
Yeah.
Payment of all the mediators, all the attorneys I've talked to, I think it's going to increase evictions.
Yep.
It absolutely is.
It's a messy law too, you know?
Yeah.
No more late rent in this family.
Right.
No more. You just can't do it. You just can't do it. You gotta notice them on the first. If they go, if you're gonna get them out after. Well, one thing that we're doing, and this is genius because it's not law, all of our new leases will be 11 months. Because you don't have to, you can still 28-day around on a less than 12 months. So any new tenant coming in will be 12 months. It is super smart. I am one of our parking management friends told me, just do 11 months. I'm like, oh my god, genius. So you gotta until they fix it. But right now, right now, for this current moment, no one gets a 12-month lease. Once you've gone beyond the 12 months, there's nothing. I mean, if you decide to renew them, you're stuck with it. But at least figuring out who they're going to be. A lot of
Yeah. Hey, Lauren, let's mark that.
Oh, believe me, there's all kinds of conversations about workarounds, like how you're going to get around this and how you can. And all of those workarounds make it worse for the tenant.
Yeah.
So now you don't get it, now it's your first base, and everyone's going to do that. You don't get a role here.
Yeah, that's a piece, right? So what you see in the first 12 months is typically what you're going to deal with. And where you were more lenient, you just can't be. And that gets to, I think what was, and they did make some adjustments in the law regarding the quiet enjoyment of everyone else.
To enforce that, figure out how to actually make that stick. It's gonna be tough.
But that's typically the issue that we deal with when we get into this is outside of payments, the majority of issues that we deal with operationally is because the rest of the residents are fussing at us because they're not able to have the quiet enjoyment of the living conditions within a unit because of the actions of another individual. And, it's an interesting conversation that we actually had related to, permanent supportive housing and Zinnia is getting real with everyone and talking about, is the individual being raised above the living environment for everyone else? Because if that's really the case from an operational perspective, you're creating a no-win situation for the operational side of it, because that's where you're in there dealing with the residents and all of these challenges in terms of their living experience based on the actions of another individual. And I think this is just another example of that. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of diving into it. And just for you all, the ADU legislation passed. So ADUs and the interplay with HOAs is going to be interesting to see, because I think it now allows ADUs anywhere. For us as a city, it doesn't make a big difference, and I'm just saying it will, I think, touch housing authority based on vouchers. And as more ADUs get built, people can utilize vouchers there, which is a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing. But for the city side, it doesn't really change anything because we already have ordinances that deal with ADUs. Those ordinances are utilized in primarily areas that don't have HOAs, because the HOA covenants are actually what's preventing the ADUs from being constructed. And so the game's going to change. So operationally for us, not a big deal. As the city, for the housing authority, I think that, and really for the vouchers generally, could balance out cost on vouchers as you see more coming online. I think the question's going to be the legal challenges from the HOA side related to the legislation and their authority. So we're going to be watching that as well.
I don't think you're going to really see we priced out on 2 different properties, adding an additional unit, like a garage or whatever. And the price to construct is just so high that I just don't know if you're going to see a real impact.
I will say on the city side, we have intended to roll out an ADU stock plan program. We have stock plans created. We have not rolled the program out. COVID derailed it, and then just general capacity with things changing over. But we have it. The goal is to roll it out. I still think even with that, it's not going to be a giant uptick because construction still is what it is.
Yeah.
But that's why it hasn't been a giant priority in terms of what can we, the impact compared to the lift. But there's something coming.
You might say a couple.
Yeah.
Right. You're just not going to see it. I know it's like the panacea in our mind that all these things are rebuilt, but having priced it out, it's just you can't return on investment. You just can't.
Yeah, we think that we're going to see it's more the basement conversions where that may be kind of where the first wave starts sliding in, because you're not constructing, you're just redoing the walls, and so we think that may be where we see it first. But we'll see.
Alright, so we got about 15 minutes left. Quarter 1 property budget review.
So I won't go property by property, but the two properties that have the biggest issue right now is Amen and Briarwood. And it's mainly due to the vacant units, the 4 vacant units. We've already exceeded the annual budget for vacancy dollars on those two properties. So we're gonna wanna watch those continuously throughout the next 3 quarters to make sure where we're gonna actually land. Amen doesn't have any developer fees, so that's a good thing. And neither does Briarwood, so we won't be not paying developer fees that were planned throughout the schedule. The other thing would be on the LHA, we are in the negative at the moment, but that is just timing of revenue. We did finally get one of our developer fees from DOM, which was $250,000, and that hits in April, so that brings us back in the black. So no cause for concern there as well. It didn't have a voucher update, but that's because the 2024 2-year tool hasn't come out yet. But we did get our funding increase, and it went 16.44%. We got $961,000 additional to our funding. Our vouchers are still on hold at the moment because the fair market increase was so large, it was like $200 per property per month. We are seeing a significant increase in costs. Landlords are taking advantage of that extra increase because of the tax hit and all of that other stuff. So to kind of give you an idea, we had 426 vouchers, and we had froze our vouchers to begin with because we're getting ready to vamp up and provide the PPVs for Village on Main. In January, we had 426 vouchers. In May, we had 416. So we have dropped 10 vouchers between January and May. However, we are increasing in cost. So those 426 vouchers costed $543,000. Our 416 vouchers costed $567,000. So they're taking advantage of it. I'm glad we got an increase because it kind of cushions. And that could be too why we got the increase, but I also think it's because we were vouchering up and they were finally seeing progress on the LHA side. Last year we got 8%, so it doubled this year. AR is pretty.
So on that note, I mean, this is a clear example of why we weren't getting money and why we're now getting money. It's because of voucher enough. I did have a conversation. So Congressman Magoo's came in, so we got $1 million for microtransit. And when he was here giving us styrofoam check, I did have a chance to talk to him about the issues that we're having on the vouchers and the dollar amounts. And so over the next probably 4 months, we're gonna, he wants us to contact his staff and start working with him so he can help us with HUD in terms of the money that we're having. And then Senator Bennett was here on a water issue, and I had the chance to talk to him and his staff about the voucher components as well. So we're going to start engaging congressionally on the voucher numbers, or the voucher dollars that are coming in.
And AR is same old. Past tenant, we have 51,000 of past tenant balances working through the 30, 60, and 90-day letter process. Subsidy timing issues, a lot of the times when we house somebody, it takes a couple months before we actually see the subsidy, even though it's being charged to the tenant ledgers. So we have some issues there. We have about 14,000 that we have some subsidy timing issues with. And then just people prepaying rent before it's due. They may pay it at the very end of the month, which it gets recorded, but it's really falling. So it kind of cautious. But you see more than one than the other. But no cause for concern on the ledgers. That is abnormal.
Like the suites, if you compare December to April, over 90, jumped from 7,000 to 24,000.
Those are rental units.
Okay. Okay, so we're still like charging rent for those units, even though we're not getting
Yes.
Money?
We still charge for them, so we still put all of the costs
Oh,
to that tenant that we're incurring
okay,
to rebuild that unit.
okay,
Partly too, and a lot of it, what's gonna happen is it's gonna get written off.
right, okay.
Because it's gonna go through the 30 days, 60, it's gonna get sent to collections.
Mhm.
And then we'll obviously, we haven't seen any money come back from collections. But it also helps us to look at those ledgers. Like we just had one recently that, what did we do for this individual? How did we store their mess stuff? We can go back to their ledger and find those transactions. Or if they come back to us. When we first started, people were coming back to get housing from us, and we didn't know that they had existing problems to begin with when they were housed before, because there was nothing on their ledger to show anything. So that's a part of it.
But then the other thing is, so I'm looking, so I know we have enough units at AMN and suites, right? Yeah, AMN and suites. So those are the over 90s. Then why is Spring Creek over 90s so high as well? 14,000 there. You know why?
Spring Creek is, so for this particular one, there is one that's getting written off. This was an individual that went to court. It went all the way to the eviction process and went to, not just eviction, it went to a trial proceeding. So that's their one individual. And it's actually just written off by Harold, and it's getting moved to collections. So once that's, you're gonna see that because of the process. We have to do the 60-day and 90-day letters, and a lot of the times they're not getting done in a timely fashion, so it's taking us a little longer to get those balances sent over to collections and read on.
It was left off the agenda, but public safety.
Security still rolling, doing very well. We've got, again, some issues with properties. And they've now moved forward with just being at the suites. Overnights and weekends. Camera update is that it sounds like our contract's almost completed. Waiting to hear back from purchasing to see if we can just use our money that we need to use by October and purchase the equipment now. That way we're all set and ready to roll. The contract is signed for the company that's going to be doing the install. And then lastly, we have our biannual crime-free training next Wednesday, the 22nd. So if anyone would like to go, let me know. I can send you a link. That's all I have. And actually, this is crazy, knock on some wood, we had no calls for service at any of the properties from Friday until last night at 3 in the morning.
When's the last time?
Mother's Day.
Someone that wanted
Yeah,
to
Mother's
go voluntarily on a mental health suites.
I did see something like Mother's Day is the lowest, you can tell us if this is true, the lowest crime day of the year.
It's because all the mothers are busy.
That, well,
We
and
didn't
the
know
joke
mothers
was.
were committing so many
Yeah.
crimes.
Yeah, exactly, that was the joke, that the mothers are too busy to go commit crime.
No. Maybe at LHAAB properties.
Yeah.
I thought the Super Bowl was the lowest crime day of the year, right?
Yeah.
I thought it was the highest for domestic violence.
That and bar fights.
Right, yeah.
Any other business? All right, let's adjourn.